This episode of Conversation with Chanda was supported by the Black Collective Foundation. The Black Collective Foundation is a philanthropic movement advancing the genius of Black-led change.
You're listening to Conversations with Chanda, a podcast that unpacks the community's grittiest, most vexing problems, hosted by Chanda Smith Baker.
Dr. Tashion Macon, welcome back to Conversations with Chanda. I am so pleased to have you.
I am so pleased to be here, Chanda. Such a pleasure, always, always.
So this book, I'm just like, we talked about it on the first episode, which if for you all listening, if you have not listened to that, you should definitely go listen to it. It was one that I have reviewed many times that has pushed me to think differently about my own goals and putting them on the wall and making sure I'm speaking them into existence. And we talked a little bit about a forthcoming book, but now this book is out and I got it right here.
Yes, awesome.
Coming in hot.
Yes.
A blueprint for Black women setting the world ablaze. So first, tell me about this title.
Well, the title for me was rooted in a couple of things. One, the full expression of how we show up in spaces, right? But taking a term from the vernacular that is a celebratory term. And what inspired it was like, it's so strange how I came at it, but it was, okay, this is how we show up. This is a term in the vernacular, social currency, the cultural currency that is positive. And here's the other good news about it. It's people can perceive fire, the hottest fire, as red, but the hottest fire is blue. And what if the Black woman is for-profit businesses or for-purpose businesses are intentionally impacting their bottom line by silencing the blue flame in their own organizations? So that's what sparked it for me. I know.
Wait a minute. Wait, I heard you say, what if they are extinguishing the blue flame?
Mm-hmm.
What if they are?
What if they are? And the impact, like to be the most educated, to be the most degreed, and to be the most silenced and the most misunderstood, but also to be the blue flame of innovation, to have proximity to challenges in very unique ways. What business in the world would intentionally place that at the bottom? And so I was intrigued by that. And also was like, how do I disrupt that? How do I support career-ready women, career-advancing women, established women to count up the cost and the coins to cultivate a career that's unique to them? So I wrote the book I wish I had when I graduated from college. Yeah.
I think that's fair. And, it's funny because, I used to be part of an organization and we had a leadership development program. And we would amp them up, right? We would see all of what they brought to the table. We were ready to just learn from them, understanding that maybe they didn't have all of the knowledge we had in terms of navigating organizations and community and the barriers that we had learned that sometimes we had even been imprisoned by, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we could see the readiness, the eagerness, the drive, and we were cultivating it. And then we would assign them to places to go work.
Mm-hmm.
And almost immediately they would come back and they would just be defeated. No one's listening to my ideas, right? And we were constantly trying to figure out how can we unleash and also explain the boundaries that will be set up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one of the things, too, that was important for me. It's like, how do you navigate these spaces and places? To just be frank, I'm the generation, we're like maybe 2 generations from our parents being blue collar workers. So their desire was really for us not to have, I'm talking about on the aggregate, not all Black people, but a lot of Black people There are a couple of generations from their parents being blue collar workers. They weren't in the spaces of white collar spaces. So they did not know how to inform us around what we would experience. We were sent out into the world with education as the great equalizer. We had to learn that that was so untrue, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had to learn that there were nuances to the way we exist in the world that were perceived as dangerous or, I talk about in the book, like ambition isn't anger. Like, where did that narrative come from, right? But when you're sent out into the world that you've got to be twice as good to get half as much or go half as far, what I was experiencing in my household was a development of drive, a
Mm-hmm.
development of determination, a development of not to be denied or defeated. Clearly understanding that there were parameters and systems and structures in place that wanted to prohibit my advancement, but not to be denied or defeated. So then when you go into these spaces of, in some spaces, not all corporate spaces or not all nonprofit spaces, but a lot of them, and you are just that. You are dismissed, you are denied, you are, perceived as intellectually dangerous. Uh, it's a lot. And I remember being at a graduation, at HBC graduation at Howard last year, and Chanda, the number of young women that were graduating magna cum laude was just every time her name was called, it was magna cum laude. And I started thinking to myself, being an African American academic is almost like being an actress. There are more of us than there are opportunities. So what happens to her? Like the 22-year-old, like how do we send her out in the world hot? How do we create a new framework for her to know what steps she could take or can take to better shore her up?
Intellectually dangerous. That brings up some comments I've heard along my journey
Mm-hmm.
where I've had to come home and really just sit and wonder, really, is it what just happened to me today, right?
Yes.
What does that mean? And do you have examples of how that shows up?
Yes. You can experience a couple of ways. Being intellectually dangerous is when you're presenting, you have all the constructs of the organization, you're in a leadership role, you have the data, you have the vision of the organization, the mission of the organization, you have the values of the organization and the strategic vision or the strategic plan, right? So all of those things have been laid in place. And then as a leader, you began to offer strategies that link directly to those things and would bring success. But because it was not the original idea of someone that didn't look like you, then the danger of your intelligence is I can't grasp it because I didn't think it. And then I really don't trust what you're thinking.
Hmm.
I don't trust your thought process. I don't trust your intellectual prowess. So then we are left to protect, preserve, or defend an idea that we know would work, right? Um, but then you're also hired to do that work, to lift up innovation, to present imagination. And then, but when you're perceived as intellectually dangerous, you can't do it. You can get the title. I say all the time, it's literally you can have the title, but you aren't necessarily able to function in the full tapestry of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I would prefer you as a thread of yourself than the tapestry of yourself.
Right. And I can imagine there will be people listening to you right now and nodding their head like, yes, girl. Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Say more or say less. Right. And
Oh,
then I imagine there are other people thinking, what if we're just in a meeting and everyone else just thinks there's a better idea?
well, I think that's collaboration,
Mm.
right? I don't think I've ever been in a space in corporate America when the tone and tenor of the space was collaborative, that any person was perceived as intellectually dangerous. Mm-hmm. So the notion that you can be in a brainstorming session and your idea is perceived as dangerous is different than, okay, collaboratively, it's not working, it's not gelling. Those are two different energies.
They are two different energies. And so I'm just going to keep pushing on this a little bit because like I know that this is a common experience. Mm-hmm. And many of us that have proximity to the work or have studied, to your point, might have ideas that are advanced of where the table's at.
Right.
And so if you are ahead, that could be perceived as being dangerous instead of innovative. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes. Yes. You can be perceived as it's not where the organization is right now. But there are sectors of business, technology is one of them, that makes space for innovation, right? You can be ahead of the curve and still embrace. You're not perceived as intellectually dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. I think the distinction is the environment. It's the environment you're in that can say, hey, Chanda, that's a dynamic idea. I think it's 2 years ahead of time. So what can we do now to set up for that 2 to 3 year plan? That's very different than it's not going to work. What would make you think of this? Well, who told you this would work? Like that is a completely different experience and a different environment. And I think the other thing that has become crystal clear for me along this journey as I engage with other women of color, whether they're executives or entrepreneurs, is understanding when we're in an environment where the work is just the work and it is not where we have value.
Mm-hmm. Say more.
That we're not going into these spaces to be validated or affirmed. We go here for direct deposit. And that is it. And that is all, because the environment itself makes no room for my drive or my desire. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So then I then have to say, okay, there's a new value proposition here. It doesn't mean I have to, quote unquote, quit my job. It means I have to understand that this is simply a job.
Right. Yeah. So the blueprint that you have in your book, it is a blueprint survival guide for women that are coming in hot?
Yes. And setting the world ablaze. Like, that's who we are as Black women, right? We are the backbone. We are the wishbone. We are all of it, right? And so for me, it was important to talk about a framework of what should we be thinking? How should we be thinking? Whether you're early in your career, you're emerging in your career, or you're established in your career. So simple things like, I just had a great conversation with a young lady. She's a program fellow at a nonprofit. And we were in a discussion about the book that, she knew I wrote it and she was looking at it on Amazon. And she said, well, what would you say to me now? I said, I would say to you now, with your job, find a way to buy a piece of property in your hometown. Because the probability of your being able to afford a home in an inner city, in any place in America, in 10 years is slim to none. Mm. So to me, that's even a career decision. That's a consciousness shift, right? Around who you're going to be in the world, right? There are so many young people who graduate, grew up in Brooklyn, can't buy a home in Brooklyn. They grew up in Harlem. They can't afford a home in Harlem. You know what I mean? But they're out working in the world.
Right. And if I follow the conversation, part of the blueprint is a disruption or an advancement generationally, right? Where a generation or two, or maybe one, or maybe currently in blue collar workers. So what it looks like to be in corporate, what it looks like to have multiple income streams. That wasn't what we were thinking about.
Right. But it's necessary, right? It's like we were not initially engaging in discussions around multiple income streams or what it means to um, create a path, like get clear about what are the things you might even dream. What is it that I left home. I grew up in East St. Louis. I graduated from high school, went to college, and never went back home, right? But I came to Atlanta very early. And this is before it was Hot Atlanta. I'm working in the entertainment industry at LaFace Records. And this is before Atlanta had become Hot Atlanta. It was on the bubble to become Hot Atlanta. And I think about all of how expensive Atlanta is right now in pockets where when we were making money, we should have been buying houses, right? It would have given us a different kind of economic freedom, which then gives you a different kind of executive freedom, right? It gives you a different kind of way to show up in the world. I remember when we were working early in our career, the brownstones in Harlem were $5,000. If we'd have bought one, we could tell a lot of people thank you, but no thank you, right?
Right.
And so a lot of coming in hot is around choice and understanding the choices that are available to you. Like there was no such thing as an expat life. Like what does that mean? To go work in Lisbon, Portugal, because you want to, and because you want to explore different cultures and different ways of being in the world and being in business.
Yeah. Can we talk about the freedom that choice brings?
Oh, my word. I would say that is I think a lot of people think money is the highest currency. Choice is the highest currency. And I think choice as a currency isn't something we discuss a lot, that we talk about a lot. You know, we heard things like when you're interviewing for a job, interview them like they're interviewing you. But no one really said, trust yourself to have a choice in your career.
Yeah.
I think and I'm talking on the aggregate from the cultural context of being an African American in this country, the narrative was, you get a good job and be grateful. Good job and be grateful. Wasn't a lot of consideration given to how much you had to work and contribute, right? And that you had to make a choice to show up in your best self and as your best self. So why did you just have to be grateful, GRATEFUL? Why couldn't you be GREATFUL? That I started doing things like that for myself. I was like, grateful versus grateful. Where can I be great and full? I don't have to accept the historical narrative of get a good job, be grateful. I could just shift the narrative and say, I choose to be in places and spaces where I can be great and full, and I get to have that choice. And as I embrace that consciousness, or even as a morsel of possibility, it started opening up. And I then got to experience places where I could be great and I could be full. And then I hit a place where I was like, this doesn't serve me the same way anymore. I made a choice to take a leap and fly and started my own. And that choice, because I say it like this, like, and Chanda, you and I talk, it's the same brain, right? Like either somebody is renting it for money they can't afford to pay you, or they're renting it for less of its value, or you bet on yourself. You bet on your own blaze. And that's what I'm
Bet
going
on
around.
your own blaze. Bet on your own blaze.
That's what I've been saying as I've had the opportunities to speak. I'm saying that, Tashawn, what is the one thing you bet on your own blaze?
Mm-hmm.
That's a gift you can give yourself. Whether an environment gives it to you or not, there is something you love that purpose requires no permission. There is something you love that you are purposed to give, and you don't need anybody's permission for that. Go bet on your own blaze doing that. You can be an executive in a space from 9 to 6 and go bake cupcakes on the weekend and bet on your own blaze and do the work to understand. Now, the cupcakes, because it's where you're passionate and it's where your purpose is, it can literally explode and grow. And now you have the thing that makes you great and full instead of just go to work and be grateful.
I used to run this organization, and at the time, the mission statement was creating choice, change, and connection. And I used to defend that mission statement to no end. They're like, to what end? I'm like, choice is an end.
It is.
Right? It is an end. And I'm like, I think about it from people that are stuck in their own homes and feel like they don't have a choice to leave, whether or not they're abused or it's a financial thing. Like, just having a choice will have you examine where you're at right now differently.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And connection, right? Being able to have the social capital, right?
Yes.
To not be isolated in your life, because there's so many of us that are holding on to moments where people are trying to extinguish our light.
Mm-hmm.
In whatever area of our lives, right? And just holding on to it as though that's a unique experience. And we know that that's not a unique experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And yeah, absolutely. And I learned, I talk a little bit about it in the book, you don't fight fire with wind, you fight it with water. And oftentimes, when we're the fire, or systems understand we're the fire, and they're putting up resistance, we become the wind. We're trying to, you know what I mean? We're trying to defend ourselves, and you're not right. And no, so that's a lot of wind energy. But when you get that water energy, when you get calm, and you understand, to your point, the power of choice, when you say, wait a minute, I got a choice here. I get to choose how I'm going to respond to this. And if I can get the wind energy is misdirected energy, right? It's taking me, it's putting me in what I call fight, flight, fear, or freeze. Or even sometimes it's just forego. You just forego it, right? But when I can get to a calm place, I can get to freedom. To your point, right? I can get choices, freedom. That man. And that's what I hope. That's my highest hope for anybody in these places or spaces, to have the courage to embrace the thought about choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is a courageous act.
It is.
That's undeniable.
It is. And to bet on your own blaze, and to trust that the same brain that goes into work, it's the same one that's going to show up for you. Mm-hmm. And you have, there is a flame in you that's going to attract the opportunities to be who you're born to be. And the money is going, I know people, they say, oh, you keep saying it. No, the money will come. Mm-hmm. Because it's a magnet. It's going to magnetize to you. And to your point, community, connection, people will start saying, oh, Chanda, like, you should call her, right? And you will look at whatever your salary was. I remember sitting at my table at the time, looking at what my salary was. and was like, okay, how many ways can I meet this number? The job is one way, right?
Right.
But I have choice and I got freedom and I got a lot of talents, right? So maybe everything isn't coming from this one stream. The bottom line is the number is the bottom line. And so I opened myself up to that possibility. It started happening. People would refer me for work. Um, I am humbled and honored that when you do the great work, and I believed in this, that your name will move. Just be a person of integrity.
Right.
Bring your best self, your highest work, your highest intelligence, your highest integrity to it, and your name will move. I haven't ever in 15 years advertised my company. It's been someone has seen the work and said, I met this young lady, these young ladies, and this is the work they did. You should call them. Or when we were doing the work for a C-level executive, we were interfacing with managers at that time. And when they got promoted, they remembered us and they called, you know what I mean? Because it's how you, to your point, it's connection and community and choice. And so if you treat people well as you're going up, when they go up, they'll remember you too.
They'll remember you. So you've had quite the journey.
Mm-hmm.
How long has this book been sitting in you?
Woo. Oh, man. You two ask the best questions.
How
Uh,
long has this book been sitting in here?
I would say a good 3 to 4 years. 3 to 4 years, maybe 5. The data was so daunting, to be honest, Chanda. It was so daunting. And, you know, we make less than, we are the most degreed and the least paid. And you keep hearing that and you're going to work and this is true. Then we're in what I call the golden cubicle, which has replaced the golden handcuff. So you go to school, you get the master's degree. So you're in debt and you're still denied because you don't ever make it out of the cubicle to get the salary rate. And when I watched when the pandemic hit and there was this great exodus of African American women in corporate spaces, and then the trifecta of trauma with George Floyd, and I was doing some speaking, the Chronicle of Philanthropy it called, Inside Philanthropy it called. I was on panels and they were talking, asking, what did I think it was? I was like, I don't think it's a great, I think it's a great recalibration. That's what I think
Oh
it is.
man.
This isn't the great resignation. This is the great recalibration. And as I said it out of my mouth, I felt like all of those data points that were living inside of me and were seeking places to connect, that statement hit. And then I started journaling about it. Like, yeah, it's a great recalibration. What does the recalibration look like? And as I began to work on the book, I started thinking about the great reskilling, how we are going to have to reskill ourselves and be in these spaces to do that for ourselves. And so, yeah, I was ruminating 5 years ago, and then the trifecta trauma hit, and then COVID hit, and it was, this is, the great resignation, and the monies that were promised, you go through all of these radical rollbacks. You can no longer have diversity, equity, and inclusion leaders or departments. And I'm fundamentally going, I don't know if anybody, this may sound extreme, but when I looked at it from a data perspective, I was like, is anybody paying attention that female blackness is under attack? Like, is anybody paying attention? Like, the head of household in most American homes is a Black woman. And if she's over diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this has been her career for 15 to 20 years, and now all of a sudden she does not have a job, and there's no place for her to potentially have a job. So what happens to her livelihood and her family? And then, the attack in academia, it was just everywhere. I'd finished writing the book and I was like, okay, yeah, because this is everywhere. And because it's happening everywhere, what are we going to do? We're going to be undaunted. We're going to be unbothered. We're going to be unbossed. We're going to be on all of that. And we're going to bet on our own blaze. That's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do. So as you're talking, I'm thinking about all of the common narratives, right? The Great Resignation. Oh man, you said something else that becomes sort of common language, racial reckoning, right? All these things that become very popularized. And yet we're in corners like, there ain't no Great Resignation. Right? Whatever they need to say to feel good. But we basically just decided, many people decided that because we just confronted death.
Yes.
Right? Whether or not it was through COVID and saying, are we going to survive this? Am I going to survive this?
Yes.
Or watching the literal death of George Floyd.
Yes.
And saying, I have more to give.
Yes.
Right. I need to align with my purpose. I need to take action, whatever those moments were. But there's always these different narratives that exist. So what do you think it will take for our narrative to become more common?
I think it's not just having a seat at the table. It's having something to say when we get to the table. Right? I think that, and when I say having something to say, not like we do not have a voice, but for us to be so committed to the value of our voice that we begin to say what the narrative is, and we begin to drive the narrative change, and we lift it up. I do believe we have to write more. Like, if I'm just being honest, if you think about civil rights movements, right? No movement, the women's suffrage movement, no movement has ever been homogenous. But what I did notice about these movements were that the message couldn't just be a message. There had to be a movement in the message. So there was a lot of writing. You had the Black newspapers, you had, and we're just not women of color, we're just not doing enough of it from a place, and you've heard me say this, Chanda, of thought leadership. We're not writing on LinkedIn. We're not, you know what I mean? We're not pushing out what we believe as thought leaders. And in LinkedIn, these are relationships you formulated over a span of your own career. And so the platforms that we can be positioned on to say what needs to be said, we're not necessarily doing them. We're being relegated to this conference room table. But there is a virtual table. There's a global table, right? That the worldwide internet has collapsed it. You can get on TikTok and start talking about something passionate and galvanize the world. Mm-hmm. But we're still saying, I sometimes feel we're still saying, but I want this table to accept me, instead of building our own table and having something to say and understanding that there's a virtual table.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go back again to the fact that we were raised with boundaries that we may not always know exist.
Right.
But they're limiting our own vision for our lives. Right. And the possibility of what that could look like.
Absolutely. Like, I love, and I've said this to you, I love your podcast because that's a table. That's a virtual table. You get to drive the narrative. You get to drive the conversation of meaningfulness. And messages that have momentum and create a movement. And so there was a time to even maybe for you to even think about being this, or, and see, to me, it's not just what you're doing, it's who you're being. It's being this. It's very different than the way we may have been taught to be, right? Um, Being an author was secondary to being an advertiser or a marketer, right? So that's how I was shaped. But I knew I had something to say. And I that the way things were coming in, the data, the same way I do any kind of messaging or messaging strategy or message mapping or any other work I do in marketing communications or advertising or media planning and buying, it was, what is the cultural narrative? What is the psychological tenor happening right now? And if it was a brand or a personality brand, I was going to say, how do I enter this conversation, lift the conversation, leverage the conversation, and ensure my brand or my personality brand is in it and successful?
Right.
I just think we aren't just yet leveraging all the possibilities and platforms that are available to us. And we want this conference room table. It's really literally this. It's either the cubicle or the conference room or the C-suite in this building. Accept me, right?
You can see how the narrative is shifting though, right? So, if you can't get a seat at the table, bring your own chair. Then you see things out there like, no, we're building our own tables. Like you can
Yes.
literally watch it, the evolution of the narratives move on social media right now.
Yes. And I think even opening up, understanding building your own table can be physical or virtual. I want to see our voices more in spaces of thought leadership, having perspectives. The message may move faster than change, but the message is necessary because it creates change. It's
So you had this book in you 4 or 5 years. You were journaling.
Yes.
And then this comes out.
Yes.
This is your first book.
Yes, this is my first book in this regard. I wrote a book 10 years ago when I really stripped some things down, and it was called How to Hold On When All Hell is Breaking Loose. How to Hold On and Rise Higher When All Hell is Breaking Loose. And that's when I made some shifts in my life. Like, this doesn't work for me. This way.
Come out. Do these words come out in this process when you've experienced something? Like, is that the inflection point that says, I got to a new place and let me tell you where I'm at. I got stuff that I need to share.
Sometimes, and I'm an avid reader, and I'm classified as a culturalist, so I just hear things very differently. Like, I can hear something and I'll go, wait a minute, and I'll just start journaling about it. And I'll let it live. I'll give it time to breathe. And I don't seek to make something grow up before it's time. Like, for me, this message in me was like, okay, it's time for her to go to kindergarten. She's got to leave the house.
Yeah. So this came out within the month?
Yeah, March 2024, and we were blessed to have within a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, it was an international bestseller. It was selling in the United States and all over Canada. So I'm so grateful for my community of Blaze Babes and what I call my Blaze Babes and Blaze Bows. I've had men who are girl dads buying it for their daughters. My friends, colleagues that are men, I was like, well, what do you want for this book? I was like, I want it to be the best graduation gift of 2024 and beyond. I would love the book to be a Who Moved My Cheese, that long that a young lady at any point in her life will pick this up and really get the message that she can bet on her own blaze.
I love it. And so it has taken off. It's become an international bestseller. And so are you on the speaking circuit? Like what's happening? You driving around the country in your van? You're
Listen, I
with
come from
the boxes in the back.
I come from the entertainment industry, honey. I'm moving these books like a mixtape. You hear me? So I've got this message like a mixtape. But yes, I am honored to be receiving invitations to speak on panels and to speak in different spaces. So I'm going to be participating in that. Where I'm going to be is on my website, TashionMacon.com. I'm definitely open for more. I really want to see this work. I've had some diversity, equity, inclusion executives who are still in these places ordering the book for their ERG teams, particularly Black women who aren't getting, they get stuck, like they get promoted and then they get stuck, like in middle management. And so just really trying to, give them a little bit of flat fire to say, listen, you're not crazy. This is what's happening, right? These things are going on. But I have a chapter in the book called Shawshanking because I believe it's my favorite movie. And I love how he dug his way to freedom standing right in front of him. And that's what I believe it's time for us to do. It's time for us to go get our freedom standing right in front of them.
Mm, I love it. And you will be coming to Minneapolis in May.
Yeah, I am so excited about it. I can't wait to see you in person again. And yes, I'll be there. Yeah, I'm excited about this work. I'm excited about the hope of it, really. I'm humbled by the reception of it. And I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful for, I'll say to the Conversations with Chanda community, she is simply a rock star. I say all the time, iron sharpens iron. And when you're around women like yourself, as much as I push you all push me back. It was very funny. They were like, okay, now you're always on us about doing X, Y, and Z. What's going on? What? I was like, well,
where the book at? Where's the book at? And let me tell you, like, I have not finished it, but I will finish this book before you get here. And but I realized that it's not because I couldn't have finished it. It's because I think I want to take it in slowly. This is just my process with the book, right? Like I had a girlfriend over the other day. She was sitting on the couch right over there reading the book, right? And I think there's something about the color. There's something about just coming in hot to your point. And what does that mean for me?
Yes.
What does it mean to set the world ablaze? Like, I just feel like I want to take in every piece of it. And there's just some things when you see it, it sparks something. And I would say that that's how I feel about this. Even when you said the title like many months ago, and I'm like, okay, let me sit back and get ready for this ride because I know that it's going to push me to new levels. And, there's a lot of people that, look, we're out here doing the damn thing, right? We're doing it. And so this is not a critique, but this is an opportunity for us to have a blueprint to extend beyond our own imagination.
Yes.
Right. And to understand the narratives, the generational lessons that have prohibited our bigger thinking.
Yes. And even I found that, to your point, that have prohibited our bigger thinking and the big leaps we may want to make. The book, I also felt like it's for allies as well. Like when the title of the book when it first started out was Coming in Hot, a Blueprint for Black Women Setting the World Ablaze, the corporations that hire them and the allies that love them. That's how long it was like,
okay.
I got some point, right? Like the allies that are with us. This is what you need to understand that we're experiencing. You're not having this experience, but when you read it, you'll understand our experience.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was trying to get to earlier, because I think sometimes we're speaking to ourselves,
Mhm.
and we're in settings where our own explanation of our experience, our own recounting of our experience is not believed.
right, right,
So
and
we
it's
need validators for our own experience. And that's horrible.
right, right, and
That's a
so
horrible place. And so, we need places and spaces that believe people when they tell them the experience, and then partner, collaborate, right? Especially if you are saying that you're working towards being more just and equitable, and you embrace diversity and you want a place of belonging, right? It requires a different level, not just of listening, but reacting to what you heard.
absolutely agreed. I
Yeah.
couldn't better. That's why you rock this podcast. Because
And rocking the podcast. I can't wait to rock with you when you get here, so that we can talk a little bit more about this and curate some experiences, so women here in the Twin Cities can hear from you. We'll do a little bit from the book. We'll have some copies available, and you've already said where they can go and find more information about where you're being, where the book is. But could you please just say one more time?
yes, one more time. The book is available on Amazon.com. And it's also you can find out where I'm going to be at www.tashionmacon.com. And I'm going to be adding more things to um, the website. I got a little idea that I want to ignite women every week to kind of see themselves in the words they see. So I'm working on something like that. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Tashion Macon, PhD.
Love it, Tashawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanda, always. And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon.
To explore more insightful conversations and stay updated on Chanda Smith Baker's work, visit smithbaker.co. That's smithbaker.co.